rolling out of the new curriculum, which is 26333, and now it is going to be 2933. What does this mean? Now that we're going back to 844 for another 1 year, who is to blame? Who did not do their homework? Who did not get their job right? My analysts will be taking us through that, and we're lucky enough to have a teacher and an educationist on this panel, so he will help us understand why we are getting things wrong in this particular new curriculum system. Once again, thank you very much for joining us at this hour on a Sunday edition. All right, let's begin with what is big on our newspapers. We'll start with the Standard newspaper. And top page, we have revealed it will cost 365 billion shillings to scrap 844. And it says the government requires an average of 90 billion shillings a year, amounting to 365 billion over the first 4 years to roll out the new system. Now, remember, this new system will now be postponed, the rollout process, of course, to 2020 for the government to get its house in order. It has been revealed that not so much planning or went in, or the thought process was not up to par as we had expected. I think this is, of course, an issue we will discuss. It's one of our major topics. But just to run through some of the comments you have on this latest situation in our education sector, how bad do we look with this dismiss?
Well, this is a major embarrassment to the Jubilee administration, because when you're coming up with a policy change like this, all stakeholders must be on board. The teachers, the students, union officials, even the normal mamamboga, everybody should be on board. But for some reason, the Jubilee administration wanted to push in some changes without consulting the stakeholders. So these are very big egg on their face. They're holding a skunk in their hands. And it seems to me that the architects of this change do not value education, or they do not understand why we need a review in our education system. For instance, the last couple of days when you meet a majority of the graduates, some of them who are Wheelers students, they can hardly speak in English. They can't engage in a conversation in one language for 10 minutes, either English, Swahili, even in their mother tongue. So you begin to wonder, what kind of graduates do we have? Last evening I attended a dinner, and I was speaking to a number of them, asking them, now some of them have got a double master's in communication. What do you want to do? One of them told me, I want to work for KTN. I said, okay, what do you want to do for KTN? She has no idea. She just wants to work for KTN. What is she going to bring to the table? In mature economies and mature jurisdictions, you come up with a curricula consistent with your national interest. Like, for instance, the Israeli, they know that they are a small nation surrounded by what they call, hostile neighbors. So the education policy is consistent with the national interest, that we must be number one when it comes to technology, because our neighbors are going to kill us every day. Then we must be food secure. Our neighbors are not going to give us food. But for Kenya, we begin to wonder, have we identified our national interest and public interest? So why do we even have an education policy? If graduates locally in Kenya, most of them cannot speak in English, but the few do, when they go to Rwanda, they're shining. When they go to Botswana, they're shining. So what is happening? It's really a mix-up. And in my view, President Kenyatta must crack the whip. Whoever who is responsible for this must pay for this. You've got the PS for Education, who was part and parcel of the thinking process, and it was very embarrassing that he's standing next to Amina Mohamed when Amina Mohamed is saying that this thing has been a failure. One would have expected for Dr. Belio Kipsang to be the first public servant to resign, because, as the accounting officer, as the authorized officer, is the one who is driving this agenda. But what does he do? He smiles away, and our kids are in trouble. Parents have invested a fortune in this, and all of us, as a nation, Kenya, we are left with a skunk in our hands.
Charles, what does this look like for you?
It's really an embarrassing case, because when you look at the proposed changes and now the rollout and everything where we are right now, we look at a monumental failure, because education is one area where we cannot go wrong as a country, because this is something that touches on the lives and the nurturing of our children and the young generation of our country. Therefore, when you get to a point where just 30 days or just a few weeks before schools reopen, and we're expecting that there's going to be a rollout, the information comes that it's going to be postponed for yet another 1 year, and now we are getting revelations of even the amount of money that was supposed to cost, yet it had not been accounted for in the budget, then really we are looking at a total failure at the Ministry of Education level, and this now takes us back to this, the failure to institutionalize some of these changes, because when a task force has been working for this long, and the ministry was asked to present their budget, yet they did not present it, then what are we really doing as a country? And then going forward, it reveals this thing of our obsession with reforms and changing things every year in, year out. It seems that every time there is a cabinet reshuffle and a new cabinet secretary comes in, they want to change things within the ministry instead of working within the frameworks that exist. And every time they are asked, why do you want to do it? They say you want to streamline it to work well. So the objective is always to streamline. But we feel like whatever we have cannot work, yet we are not implementing it properly. Therefore, it's a question of improper stakeholder involvement, but the biggest failure is at the ministry level, because I'm looking at it especially that budget was not allocated, yet a task force has been working on this for the longest time. It started in 2012 when the Odhiambo Commission, I think, task force sat, and they released a report. So about 2 weeks before we go to reopening of schools and we get such information, even as young parents, we are very dismayed, because now children who are supposed to just progress properly, especially the ones who are now in grade 3, who are going to grade 4, they've been in a new system, and then all of a sudden they're taken back to an old system. The level of disruption and confusion that is being visited upon these children is really atrocious, and I agree that this is one area where heads must roll.
Husband, you're a lecturer. You have a big understanding, because you're in it, of how the education system works, because we were supposed to move to 26333, now it's going to be 2933. We seem to be moving forward, moving back. There's some level of disarray that many parents, like he says, do not understand.
Yeah, well, you know, education is a very critical sector, because, again, education underpins almost all the other aspects of the society. And it is disturbing when we have, you know, this kind of information coming out, that we've had a pilot that is going on and we're facing 844, but then we'll continue with 844 for the next 1 year as we pilot. But I would say that looking at what is happening right now, it is just important that, you know, they've realized that there was a big gap in the implementation of the new curriculum, and they want to sort it now. Because just like Dismas has said, it is critical to understand that the Ministry of Education is a going concern, that even if we have a new cabinet secretary, the accounting officers, the PSs, need to ensure that things are flowing and we don't stagnate. So in the previous, I think in the previous ministry that was headed by another cabinet secretary, I think there was a lot of urgency to have things moving. And I don't think that works in education, because education philosophers would tell you that there are 3 critical dimensions in education. There is the creative dimension, there is the normative dimension, and the dialogical dimension. Now, on the normative, I mean, it's fairly simple that education is supposed to be within the norms of the society. But then if you look at this new curriculum, the competency-based curriculum, it is big on the creative dimension and the dialogical dimension. And what we are looking at is to have graduates or, you know, pupils and high school students who can articulate issues dialogically in a structured way and reason and understand that education is supposed to help them be creative in solving problems in the society. And if you look at what is going on right now, you'd understand that Ambassador Amina Abdallah understands that critically well. And there is a way in which she doesn't want to rush the process, because this is not about changing policy. This is about putting up something that will respond to the issues of Kenyans today and for the next foreseeable many years. And I think it is just kudos to her for just bringing this to a stop, extending it by 1 year. It's going to be very expensive, but I think I appreciate the fact that this has been arrested now and she is doing something. If you look at what they're proposing right now, 9 years in primary and then 3 years post-primary, and you look at the critical issues that they're raising, why they need to do that, they're actually taking us more to the normative dimension, because again, if you look at the society that we live in today, there's a lot of blame on both teachers and parents. And the new curriculum as it is designed, the 2933 as it is designed, primary school is going to be for 9 years, just to allow kids to spend more time with their parents. So there is that component of the normative dimension, which if, combined with the creative and the dialogical dimension, would actually make a lot of sense. And I think for me, I'm very happy that this has been arrested right now, and they're addressing these issues. Especially, if you're going to make our graduates competent, we just need to have competent people who are teaching them. And I don't think that was factored in the first rollout.
You would rather do it now than do it later?
We'd rather do it now.
Yes, Carol.
I think this whole discussion takes us back to stakeholder engagement. How much did we engage? And also when we talk about public participation, do we mean that when we buy pressure groups to come to City Hall and tell us what they have been programmed to say, is that public participation? Is it enough? Because where we are now, we were told before when the trade union, the unions raised issues with the curriculum, we were told that everything is okay, stakeholders have had a chance to have a look at it. But again, history did not guide us in this matter. When President Moi introduced 844, it took 4 years to implement. And look at it this way. Back then, the student ratio to the student population was very minimal, but it took 4 years. What is the miracle that will be here that will take 6 months to implement when we have more than 1 million students in each class? Yeah. Those are some of the questions. Okay. But again, I think the people who are driving the education policy for a long time have failed to realize or recognize that education is the fuel that drives most democracies. If you get education wrong, no matter how good the policy or the manifesto of the regime of the day is, it will never get it right. All right. The other thing is this, Akisa. We can never raise the issue like previous. In a government is eternal unless there is a coup. You can never, nobody can come and say the previous minister. No, that is why we have permanent secretaries and the ministry remaining there for the memory. And I think, finally, the other thing that we need to address as a nation, are we going to be solving our issues with the thinking that all we want is a PR? You know, this system, we could have gotten it right were it not for the PR and the big man syndrome around it. And I thank Amina for showing leadership. It is said that it is only a fool who doesn't change his mind.
All right. This, of course, is one of our big topics. We'll delve deeper into it. Page 2 of the Standard newspaper has a story on the vetting of the President Uhuru Kenyatta's nominee to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, the CEO, Twalib Mbarak, who says we should expect fireworks in his first 100 days at the ESCC. We're talking about the ESCC. We are talking about a lot of problems as far as corruption is concerned in this country. They have been blamed for a lackluster approach to matters corruption in this country. Do you believe in 100 days we are going to see fireworks? Quickly, we don't have too much time on the paper.
I mean, the fellows who are responsible for the anti-corruption agenda, they would rather tell Kenyans to look at the scoreboard. Let's look at them from successful prosecutions and successful investigations. But even telling us that we're going to see fireworks in the next 100 days, I mean, President Kenyatta has told us the same thing, that we are going to see fireworks. His deputy has told us the same thing. Dr. Matiang'i, the same thing. The DPP, the same thing. Every public servant of rank has told us you're going to be seeing fireworks. Now you begin to wonder, who among these public servants is actually a thief? Because, you know, we are told that the public servants of rank are the architects of corruption. So you begin to wonder who among them is a victim and who is going to fight this thing. So for the new boss, we should just wait. He should tell us, give me time. And then we see successful investigations that when they go to the DPP, they're not dismissed. But you know, giving us, this is actually all Caesar, no steak. When you go to a restaurant and order for a nice meal, then you see a plate coming with a lot of Caesar. When it cools down, there's nothing on that plate. So let him go to the kitchen, prepare a nice meal and serve it, instead of making promises.
What does this mean, Kipkule, what does this mean for us as Kenyans? If indeed he's confirmed as a top man at the ESCC, change of guard, it seems to be working on the other end with the DPP? What will it mean for the EACC?
Well, I think I choose to be an optimist in this case because when you look at Mbarak and how he has come in, he's really not someone who, it looks more like a headhunt. It's someone who was looked for specifically because there is some work that has to be done. And therefore, when the DCI, the new DCI and also the DPP came in, there was a bit of pessimism around them, but you have seen that they've been able to do quite a lot, not satisfactorily, but at least significantly, they have changed things around them. Therefore, I optimistically look at Mbarak and hope that the process of selecting him and putting him there considered the current context where we find ourselves in. And therefore, when he says we expect fireworks in the next 100 days, well, I may doubt that because it's within a very short time and he may have to accustom himself to how things are going. But again, we must consider that he worked for within this agency. I think it was during the CASA time. So he's someone who has knowledge and I believe the competence to work. Therefore, the different thing that is happening right now is that the persons who are heading these institutions that are charged with the issue of fighting corruption and ethics are really coming in at a time when their boss nominally is the president and is the one who is almost supervising them at a personal or even a day-to-day basis. Therefore, with that weight of political goodwill from the president and pushing them to deliver, I think we may get to see something. The only concern is that this should be sustained over time and then it also gets institutionalized so that we no longer talk about the president's fight against corruption, but the fight against corruption in Kenya. But optimistically, I think we are in for some changes.
Yes. Husband, do you think change of guard in our top anti-corruption bodies means much for us?
No, I don't think it means anything at all because we've seen a lot of changes.
You're taking the pessimist approach.
Yes, we've seen a lot of changes. We've seen chairmen come and go. We've seen CEOs come and go. But there is very little to show for it. And I agree with Dismas that we need deliverables. I think what he's doing is very unfortunate. He's making himself a Goliath. And the risk in that is that there's a cartel that now looks at him as a very easy target, you know. And the best bet for me would be, maybe he's looking for the job to get a job, so he can say anything. But he should lie low like an envelope, do his work. All we should see, guys get arraigned in court, charged, or if they're acquitted, but we should see something happening, you know. Better still, Kenyans would want to see stolen money taken back to the public coffers. So rather than talk so much, I think he should just get the job, if he does, and work.
Are you taking the pessimist or the optimists?
I'll take the Kenyan direction.
The Kenyan
we will
direction.
face the things that they are. First of all, Mbarak must be understood within the confines of a man looking for a job. He might even say, I'll bring down rain when we are in the center of July. So that one must be understood within there. The other thing also, when I first read this story, I remembered my good law professor, PLO Lumumba. When he came in with all ras and matters and everything. He brought all noise, but when his legacy is talked about, his fight on anti-corruption, very little will be talked about. Why? Because the EACC as it is a captured institution, if you ask me. The forces around there will not allow Mbarak to operate if this is the approach he will take. One, what he ought to have done is to familiarize himself with whatever is happening at the EACC. Two, he ought to have delivered to Kenyans because he is coming in as a person of unknown public record. We do not know his public record. So what he ought to have done is to come, demonstrate something, and show us results. And finally, also, what we need to reiterate is that EACC is an independent commission. Anytime we discuss the presidency as in a manner that it directs EACC, the fight against corruption takes another instance. And my final plea to Mbarak, if he will get the job, which I hope he will, I hope he does not join the gang of weaponizing corruption and fighting corruption through propaganda. Corruption should be fought through courts of law.
Finally, the top story on Sunday Nation, Uhuru and Raila, the untold story of the handshake. They've gone expansively on how this particular deal was brokered, what are some of the issues that came up. The president's visit to Kisumu was has been described as the epitome of the handshake since it was done in March this year. What do you expect to come out of this? Because there are already murmurs as well from a story on the Standard that there could be a cabinet reshuffle because of the handshake?
His I am a constitutionalist in terms of a philosophy that guides a nation. We cannot build a nation around individuals. We build a nation around institutions. So if for us to sustain the country known as Kenya going forward, we can never build the Kenyan dream on Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, no matter what the handshake has brought so far. When a man is diarrheaing, you do not end the diarrhea by blocking the anus. You give them medicine. Whatever we are doing is tantamount to that. So for us to have proper healing as a country, we need to sit down and address issues that have been raised for a long time.
So
it won't help. In 1997, we had the IPPG. In 2008, we had the National Accord. We had the TGRC. What has come out of all this? We must ask ourselves as Kenyans, even as the supporters.
Now we have the building bridges.
Yes, even as the supporters of the two, Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, sing hey, hi on all this, we must remind them that there was an IPPG between Moi and Raila. There was the National Accord between Kibaki and Raila. There was all these things have always come. The main beneficiaries are politicians. Wanjiku, Mora, and all those manner of people, the downtrodden in this country, will never feel. Akisa, I am asking you a question, a very genuine question. The person who lost, or the parents or the people who lost Baby Pendo, do you think they care about the handshake? The other thing, the people in Korogosho and Mathare who lost their property because of riots and they are taking loans, do you think Equity or National Bank cares that there is an handshake? No. Those are the germane issues that the handshake must sort, not crowds.
We have 5 minutes. I'll let you respond to this really quickly in under 5 minutes.
Well, I want to disagree with him. First of all, I think IPPG had nothing to do with Raila Odinga. It was actually a late entrant to the IPPG discussion. It was a parliamentary caucus that wanted certain reforms, which they got, and it actually ushered us to what we have today, the 2010 constitution. But then, looking at the handshake, I would say that there are a lot of things that happened, you know. But I'm reminded of this Lusophone nationalist called Noemi D'Souza, who was also a poet, who wrote a poet that we shall not mourn the dead, but will use the blood of the dead to germinate the seeds of freedom. Given that we had a very, upheaval and period during the election and people died, we should not forget the fact that we lost lives unnecessarily. But we should use this opportunity to ensure that we don't lose any more lives during an election. With or without institutions, I think what President Uhuru Kenyatta and the Right Honorable Raila Odinga have done, they've given us a framework from which we can now build institutions, a political goodwill where politicians can discuss and agree on certain things. But most importantly, they've reminded Kenyans that it is never about Kenyans. It is about the political leaders. And I think going forward, this is something that Kenyans need to take dear to their minds, not their hearts. That when you're fighting during a political contest, just know that you are on your own. So whether they build institutions, whether it comes to fruition, I think there is a certain consciousness that is coming out of this, and it is coming to Kenyans, and there is that realization that will put Kenyans in a very good position in terms of holding political leaders accountable going forward.
Yes.
Well, like I said, I think for the Building Bridges initiative, I look at it in terms of questioning its utility. Why did Raila and Uhuru Kenyatta shake hands? President Uhuru Kenyatta had just been freshly sworn in, and he had articulated his legacy and the Big Four and everything he wanted to do. But the environment to implement it was not there because of the tensions that were existing at that time. So for President Uhuru Kenyatta, what he really wanted was to have this stable environment for him to rule in his second term and to have a good place of now anchoring his legacy, which is why when if you go back the chronology of things that have happened, even culminating into Kisumu over the weekend, in 2017, December, during Jamhuri Day, President Uhuru Kenyatta articulated his Big Four for the first time. And then in March, he shook hands with Raila Odinga. And during Jamhuri Day 2018, he said that I'm going to Kisumu to implement the universal healthcare program. So for Uhuru Kenyatta, the moment you detach his legacy from the Building Bridges initiative, then he's not in it. So for him, the utility was for him to be able to have an environment to anchor his legacy.
So he's the biggest beneficiary
He
of the
is,
handshake.
of course. And for Raila Odinga, I do not think that Raila Odinga really exited the political scene. He only maybe muddied himself too much that he needed to reinvent and redeem his image, both locally and internationally. And through the handshake, he's been able to achieve it. So my conception about the handshake is a handshake between two people, a pact between two persons, not between political parties. And when you look at it in terms of now influencing state appointments, going further to influence even statecraft or the affairs of the states, I think that now borders on speculation. But for now, it's just between these two gentlemen for the reason that I've stated earlier.
Okay,
Yeah.
The handshake is going to be a success if every Kenyan has got an insurable interest. If Mura from a village in Mosocho is a shareholder in this. But so far as it is, there are only two shareholders, President Kenyatta and his brother Raila Odinga. They're the two principal shareholders. The rest of the Kenyans are bystanders. We watched events in Nyaza with a lot of interest. It's as if it was a celebration between two families, the Raila Jaramogi Oginga Odinga and Jomo Kenyatta families. But where do the rest of the Kenyans sit? We have not been told that we can actually go buy insurance in this project. That's number one. And then number two, and probably most important, now that we have these two powerful politicians in Kenya having a conversation, the conversation will go to West if it does not translate into solid institutions which will guarantee us peace and tranquility every 5 years. Because now we're in a situation that wherever, every 5 years, there's a lot of tension. Now, if President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga do not translate their friendship into powerful institutions, we are going nowhere. For instance, I've not heard President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga talking about sorting out the IBC, which is the fountain of all the trouble in Kenya. You know, they've gone to a university, they've been given honorary degrees, but nobody's speaking about IBC. And you know, the crux of the matter is IBC. For some reason, we are told that Kenyans are able to count money, but we cannot count votes. If they cannot sort out that issue of counting votes, then this handshake will be a waste of time.
All right. Thank you very much. Those are some of the top stories we have in our newspapers. Get yourself a copy of the Standard newspaper for in-depth analysis on some of the biggest stories, and of course just keeping you up to date with what is happening in the country and beyond. I want us to take a quick break here on Sunday edition. When we get back, we will be taking a look at President Uhuru Kenyatta's visit to Kisumu, where he was officially launching the universal health care. And of course, politics took center stage in that particular visit. He was hosted by Raila Odinga in his home in Bondo at Opoda Farm. So we will be delving deeper into some of the issues that came up and what this means politically, the visit by President Uhuru Kenyatta to Kisumu. So stay with us. We have that and more lined up for you.